Hi everyone, I'm Les.
And I'm Ashley.
And you're listening to Anthropotamus, where we explore some of your favorite anthropology topics.
Hi everyone, welcome to our latest episode of Anthropotamus. We're here today with Alesha Serada, and we'll be discussing their article, Who Speaks Tho Fan, Deconstructing the Constructed Language of Jade Empire. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and especially for reading my article, because I rarely get attention for such niche subjects. I get a lot of attention for the main work that I did for my dissertation, which is not related to this at all. And it is my pleasure to talk about this bit of language nerddom.
But I feel like this is a topic that would appeal to a lot of people outside of academia. And maybe the article just needs to be shared more outside of ResearchGate.
Yes, it's a problem that the industry is definitely interested in the ways how make games more profitable, which is the topic of my dissertation, and some other of my work which gets cited pretty frequently. But unfortunately, not many game companies want to know how to make better games. People bring this knowledge in, and there are game designers, narrative designers, maybe even conlang designers, linguists who have their soul in making games, making the best possible games, the most immersive games, creating these imaginative game worlds. But unfortunately, from what I can gather, this is not the priority in the business of game development right now. So yeah, I mean, I'm not a specialist in constructed languages or conlangs. There are many people who are much better than me at this particular subject, and some of them they do get employed, some of them they do get hired by game companies, especially now. But also, I would say sharing knowledge does not really help overcome stereotypes, which is the problem that also plagued this game when it was in development, which is my article is about.
Is it Tho Fan? Is that how you pronounce it?
Nobody knows because even the game developers they started this as Tho Fan, and it is supposed to be influenced by Mandarin Chinese. So Fan is speech kind of. I guess if we pronounce it as if it was some dialect of Chinese, it would be Tho Fan. But this is the language nerdery, which is already becoming its own story. So yeah, I guess it would be Tho Fan in the fictional language as it was supposed to be. But then game developers were not too consistent about it. So I guess there are very few people like me who are like language purists, and we would say, no, it would be Tho Fan, because that's the influence of Mandarin Chinese and probably some dialects of it, and probably some historical development that is almost that was almost truthfully reconstructed in some, or reimagined in some way when this language was created. Yeah.
So I'm not a gamer. I don't follow any of this. I mean, even though I'm not into games, the article was very interesting. I was curious to know, like, we always hear about like Klingon and Elvish or whatever it's called. Is it common for games to create these constructed languages that continue to use the same like sentences to mean different things? Is that common? Or do games usually put more effort into actually constructing a new language?
From what I know, and this comes mostly from the research done by other people, much more care was put into that, but also the languages themselves were much less developed. I think in Dragon Age, they also have several conlangs, but they're also almost like, again, the fans and the gamers, they put a lot of effort into reconstructing these languages, but there is simply less linguistic material for them to work with. There are less phrases, less less complete. Mostly, there's just less complete phrases or lines in those languages in the game world. And when we look at such cases as Klingon or the language of the Navi tribe, which is which exists, there are books on it and in it, I believe. Those are well codified languages, accessible to the interested audience. So I would say this case of Tho Fan, it was just a little bit unlucky. It was in the middle of these two tendencies, of which one is to just give as little as possible to the gamers, so they just do the work themselves, but also this prevents them from discovering, like this prevents them from finding all these mistakes, inconsistencies, so there is less work to be put into developing such language. And the other way to do it is to hire a linguist or maybe several ones, and to honestly create an entirely new language, such as Klingon or the Navi, the language of Navi. And this is, of course, much more interesting. But again, this is the subject that other people work on, really. Like there is the very involved community of specialists and fans of constructed languages, and I'm not a part of it. I came as a person who was just weirded out by the strange mutation of the Chinese language in Tho Fan, so I knew how to treat that particular subject. I would say now, and I mention it at the end of my article, now we have a generative AI. It makes so much easier to create a new language and put it into a game. This takes so much less resources. Of course, you still need a human to, because languages are inherently human. They need to be, like, they come from the way humans think and see the world and communicate about it and think about it. So you still need a human creator to create a convincing constructed language. And yet now we have all these tools. You don't need those now you have AI which can just generate the vocabulary and the grammar and complete sentences in it. Why is nobody doing that? This disappoints me a little bit. And this also makes it more interesting to study the history of gaming, because again, Jade Empire is very much a part of game history now. You can still play it, but it is it is a little bit like a museum, which is kind of the point of the game anyways, but it is even more of a museum now of this lost game world.
Do you think that it would have been easier to include some actual Mandarin or other variants of Chinese than creating a language just to be used in clip art, which seems like that's essentially what it is. It's set dressing. So it seems to me like it might be easier to simply find some phrases that they would like to use and have people record those or, put those into the art pieces.
Yes, and this is the question that I was asking myself, like why they took this difficult road. Why did they put all this effort into creating something that was not that viable in the end? Yes, it would be easier to use normal Mandarin Chinese, even though it would be like old Chinese, but also we have very, very good records of old Chinese, because Chinese literature is vast. It goes back like at least 200 years, and there are plenty of sources to study it, plenty of manuscripts to read and reconstruct the language. But again, I'm sorry, I'm getting into my nerd mode again. Of course, there are games about China and even about ancient China that just use bits and pieces of the Chinese language. So the question why this was not the case, the developers answered that they wanted kind of in their replies to the press where they kind of wanted to disengage from the actual China because it was a homage to China and Chinese culture, not a reconstruction of one, which is actually a very good answer because if you do the reconstruction, then you have the question of authenticity. And when you do something completely new, you don't have to be authentic in this mainstream understanding of authenticity. You just need to be trustworthy. You need to be convincing in constructing, in creating your game world. So my answer that I give in the article is that, again, this banal evil that we call Orientalism, which is the desire of certain holders of power in the West to replace a very complicated and uncontrollable image of the actual East and actual Eastern countries and cultures with this easily controllable image that brings up all these symbols of spirituality and wisdom and all those concepts that eventually allow this image to be in control of those who created it, that is those who represent the West and its colonial powers eventually. It all comes down to colonialism as well. And again, it's like a classical case of Edward Said's Orientalism, taming the East, replacing it with this easily controllable pastiche, which has nothing or very little to do with the actual, in our case, linguistic reality of Chinese or Old Chinese. And even then, human creativity and the creativity of game developers, game designers, it can overcome these stereotypes because I ask myself, okay, this is definitely not Chinese. I can see that it's not. I can hear that it's not Mandarin Chinese. It's nothing like Chinese. But I started this journey with this like uncanny valley feeling that this language has nothing to do with Chinese. Then I educated myself. I read a little bit about the history of Chinese language, about the old Chinese, the ancient Chinese, how it worked, how it was phonetically organized, what kind of grammar existed. And then I realized that in its initial shape, this Tho Fan language, it could have been a dialect of Old Chinese. Yes, it is very different from contemporary Mandarin Chinese, but it is not completely detached from from its linguistic reality, from its history. It could have been possible. Like it is not that different from the reconstructions of Old Chinese that we have. And this also tells us something about human creativity today, the creativity of game designers, of game developers, of the linguists who create new languages to build fictional worlds around them. So there is still hope in the humanity in this regard. Yes, it is much easier just to use Chinese, but it brings a completely different set of problems. So again, probably the mistake was that the language was too developed to it was too developed to be used just as a few throwaway lines, but it also was not treated with enough respect to be well integrated into the game, which was probably lost at the stage of production. That's my assumption based on my experience with game developers. All good things, they get lost in production if the production is troubled enough.
Before I ask this question, how do we pronounce this? Wuxia? Wuxia? When you're talking about the genre?
Wuxia.
Wuxia.
At
Wuxia?
least
What?
Wuxia. I'm sorry, I don't remember the tones because there are. If you just say usia, it is enough.
Usha. Okay.
Some people like when you like in this like in a more southern like in southern dialect, it would be even usha, I guess. Uh, yeah, that's the linguistic reality of Chinese. It's too complicated. So usha, usha. I think if you say usha in the south, like people will understand what you mean.
The difficulties of tonal languages.
I got used to it with time, but it is if you are like a speaker of an if you've only learned Indo-European languages in your life, the way that the words are constructed in normal, regular Mandarin, Chinese, literally Chinese, there is not even that much division between words. Like you can't with 100% certainty say that something is a word in just normal Mandarin Chinese. Of course, like you will have a dictionary which will define it as a word, but there are many like borderline cases, and this is why when you look at the text written in Chinese, there are no spaces between words because the how to say uh, even even like there is not that much different between a word or a part of a word or even a part of the sentence as it is in the European languages. So yeah, here it goes. Chinese language is complicated. It's even worse than you probably thought it is, and yet it's one of the most spoken languages in the world, at least if we take it together with all dialects. So yeah,
Well,
Uxia, like to me, Uxia, I think because I learned from like more normative way to pronounce it, and this is the way. Like again, what you see on what we are discussing now is not even like we know what it is because we know the context. But again, when we speak about the Chinese language and characters that are used, you can't really, if you don't have the context, you only have the way the word is pronounced. In most cases, you can't. In most cases, you don't know which word this is. Together with that, I've just told you that there are no hard boundaries between words. So yeah, this is the material that linguists work with, and there is no wonder that then Tho Fan did not really catch up. But also now you can see that even that amount of work that went into creating this language, it is already enormous and very valuable and should be preserved and studied because even making a relatively simple constructed language, especially on the base of the Chinese language, inspired by Chinese language, it is already a challenge that requires more than normally human level of understanding various languages from different parts of the world.
Yeah, I was gonna say, based on what you're telling me, or were telling us, it seems like they may have bitten off a little more than they could chew when they were trying to construct a language based on Chinese.
I've learned more than, I guess, 5 languages in my life, most of them really poorly, but uh, as soon as you leave the realm of Indo-European languages, you are entering a complete clusterfuck, if I might say so. Like now I'm in Finland. I spent 5 years learning Finnish, which is not an Indo-European language. It is a language that is kind of unrelated to any of its neighbors, and it just works differently. It was easier for me to accept that Finnish language is just different because I already had some experience learning Chinese. But like you still need to make this leap into learning at least one language which is not related to your language, and then you can see that meanings are constructed and expressed and embodied in different languages in all kinds of ways. Like when I read like Finnish, there are so many words in a very any normal, completely normal Finnish text, such as, I don't know, a recipe. It will have at least several words that don't exist in any dictionary because the Finnish language just works like that. It just works like that. But again, this is such a source of inspiration. Again, if we go back to the father of all conlangs, Tolkien, Professor Professor Tolkien, who was a linguist, and he was very much inspired by such languages as Welsh and Finnish to create Elven languages for his universe. And this is what makes these this is to me this is one of the reasons why Tolkien's worlds are so viable. They rely on they were built around languages. This is a well-documented fact. So Tolkien first created languages, and then he created literature on in these languages, and then he kind of built the entire world of Middle Earth around these texts as a linguist would do. So when you like have at least 2 points of comparison, like non-European Finnish language and Celtic, also I think Celtic is not in the European, Welsh language, which is also very special from what I've heard. And then he had the Old German and Old English, which are closer to the languages that we mostly learn at school, say. Those, like, we are more used to the languages that are related to Old German and Old English than we do about languages such as Finnish or Welsh. So when you but when you have at least several points of references that are situated in different languages, different ways to express meaning, to convey meaning, different ways to speak, to structure your thoughts, to structure your speech, then you get this multi-dimensional picture, which helps you imagine fictional worlds, for example, that are like above and beyond human imagination, even above and beyond the imagination of a single human being, for example, because then these worlds, they are shared with your readers, and or if it's like a Navi language, like these words become universes by themselves to which people want to come, and they want to come and bring something with them, and they want to learn the language, they want to contribute to these fictional worlds as fans of these worlds. And this is how it becomes bigger than just a single work of literature or a single game. Yes, we were talking about whether Chinese was too difficult, like it was too much to use as a basis for new languages. Again, this depends on from where you come from. Like, to me, Russian is the simplest language on earth. I know for a fact that it is not true to the majority of people on earth. And this also influences the way I think, the way I talk, the way I write. And yeah, but also if my native language was Finnish, I would have a completely different perspective on which languages are easy and which languages are complicated, difficult to learn. Like when I ask like a Korean person, they would say, "Oh, Chinese is not that bad. It's not like German." It's easier than German, of course. German is the worst language. An imaginary Korean person would say. Okay, I can actually ask. I know a Korean person who also speaks German, so I guess I could ask, but it is very much, it very much depends on what is your native ground. Where are you standing as a um, speaking, talking human being and as a linguist? And linguists, they just have more playgrounds to play. They know more languages normally, more than one at least.
I wanted to go back to when you speak of that, well, now I don't remember how to pronounce it. Wuxia,
Yes,
wuxia
let's go
genre.
back to Usha.
Um, so you bring that up in the article, and it's very popular here in the United States, right? Movie after movie, of that genre has come out. And yet you mentioned China continues to be underrepresented within video games. Do you have an opinion as to why movies have become so popular, but not so much video games?
Uh, Actually, as of 2025, as of 2025, I would retract my opinion because now I can see more Chinese video games becoming more popular in the West, such as the Black Myth Ukun. It has a following in China, and it has a cult following outside of China. And this game is Chinese, developed in China and based on Chinese literature and mythology, which is also a part of this great Chinese literature of this canon of great Chinese classical literature. So it is changing now. I was writing this article several years ago. I think I started writing it in like 2015, maybe. And then I came back to it, and fortunately, as soon as I finished it and it was accepted for publication, we started seeing more representation of China in uh, now global gaming culture. And we are starting to see more Chinese not just games, but now we have this TikTok situation when American users are migrating to the literal Chinese analog of TikTok, which is supposed to be banned soon. And now they're kind of catching up with a little bit of, again, language and culture to whatever, like using Google Translate when it's needed. And this is kind of the Chinese language becomes kind of a part of the mass culture in this new and very unexpected way. So this is changing now. And again, as a cultural studies scholar, I would say follow the capital, who has the most money, who has the most power, and who decides which games to develop, which games to publish to, and to which audiences they should be sold. So before that, the main market for video gaming was probably American adolescents, mostly male, and now gaming is truly global, and all kinds of games are produced for all kinds of gamers, and some of them find popularity regardless of these borders between languages and cultures. Because eventually, when you live in a multilingual world, there are no clear boundaries between languages even. But again, this is linguistic nerddom, and yeah, it may take us to very difficult, like to very dangerous places, such as what is a dialect? What is the difference between a dialect and language? And the answer is it is purely political. So yeah. And again, the wuxia movies, the martial art films, they kind of have a troubled history on their own because these has always been like martial arts have always been a huge inspiration for world building, fictional world building in China, all parts of it. And also we must note that like the genre, like it matured in Hong Kong, which uses a different dialect of Chinese. It's Cantonese. So most like a lot of wuxia films, a lot of martial arts films, they were filmed in Cantonese, or in quite a lot of cases they were dubbed, or like they had to like them. Sometimes there were several like versions of the same film for the Hong Kong audience, for the Cantonese speaking audience, and for the mainland audience. And of course, there is also the huge American audience. And also, all these films are very popular in Europe as well. Maybe not as much because like there's much to choose from here. There's a lot to choose from, to watch to or to listen to. So yeah, they are not like a part of the cult. They're just they have their fandom, they have their fans. So, and the Chinese government has always had this ambiguous relationship to this part of Chinese culture. It was kind of, sometimes it was like it was always treated as pop culture, like culture for the masses, like low culture, lowbrow culture, which was not considered national heritage until recently, until relatively recently. And again, I think I'm mentioning like Zhao Yimou and other Chinese directors who made this breakthrough in the early 2000s and made these films that were more accessible to the Western audience, and also they were more politically compliant. So the Chinese government would have less issues with representing China with these particular films. If you look at them, if you watch them, most of them are quite conservative in their message. From any viewpoint, they are very digestible. They are still incredibly complicated because they're based on like centuries of tradition in fiction about martial arts. And yeah, they're kind of they're kind of they're not subversive mostly. There is very they're mostly very conservative in terms of politics and very openly so. And this is the message that is kind of it is this is the message that everyone wants to hear and to see it in a very spectacular form, such as a martial arts film. So yeah, this is one of the reasons. And also there is always like the story of an underdog who transforms into a hero. Who doesn't love that? And this, I wouldn't say that it is universal, because when you look at the actual cinematography, like there are a lot of differences, but you need to be a nerd. Again, you need to be a nerd to go deep into them. I would say right now, I don't see that much enthusiasm, but even in Finland, there was an Usia movie in Finland, and it was like completely tongue in cheek. It was like, how do they call these Italian westerns? I don't remember. I don't know this particular genre that well, but like there's like the whole subgenre of westerns made in Italy. So this is, and
Spag
here we have,
spaghetti westerns.
yes, spaghetti westerns. So
My
now
grandmother loved them. They were a staple of my childhood.
those are fairy tales. They're basically fairy tales, and people want to believe in them. These are the tales that people want to hear. People want to be told to them in the most spectacular manner again. So now Finland has its, I like, probably it would be Miyake Usia film, which was terrible, but it was a cultural event, and I think it entered the ranks of the films that are so bad that they are good. So there is also that. I don't see that much influence in. I don't have the data on gaming, because of course there are fighting games and they rely heavily on the Usia tradition. But I'm not playing fight. I don't play fighting games. They're a very niche genre relatively. So people who play them, they're completely dedicated, but also not many outsiders play them. There are very few casual fighting games. Of course, there is that. I'm not sure where this genre is going right now. I think I haven't seen much in the news. Maybe there are very popular, very niche video games that rely on Chinese and otherwise Eastern traditions of martial arts for storytelling, because they also have storytelling. But yeah, there is a lot of intersection in how Usia movies, Usia films entered the Western cultural, like the global culture, probably not Western, global, we can say global at this point. So there are there are different ways in which they change these films, these Asian cinema has changed gaming also. Again, there are better researchers than me who have written on that, and I have a few references in my article, I believe. But yeah, the difference also is in the size of the industry because again, the film industry has always been very strong in Hong Kong, for example, and later in mainland China. So there is also that the money was there, the audience was there, the audience wanted this spectacle, and we still want this spectacle. We just get it from different sources now, I guess, mostly from video games, at least some people.
You know, I forgot to ask you at the beginning, you received your PhD, right? I
Yeah.
know you had been working on it. Okay, because usually I would have had introduced you as doctor, but I did not.
Yes.
I forgot to ask you.
Yes, I'm a doctor, and you know what I have? I have a sword. Do you know this meme about when you get a PhD in Finland, you get a sword? I
I've
got a
never heard
sword.
that.
No.
I got it. I like it's in the other room. I can bring it to show
If you'd
it to
like
you.
to, sure, yeah.
Of course, who wouldn't like brag a sword?
I want a sword.
I don't have a PhD, but I also have a sword.
I don't have either. I wanted to learn how to use a sword. I
I
actually,
actually have taken a fencing class,
I'm not fencing. I don't want to do fencing, but
but that, I mean,
I have
swords.
Googled it. I have Googled like sword classes in Sacramento.
Are there any in Sacramento?
There's
I've looked as well, and the only ones that I found were like,
Yeah, as I've said, who wouldn't brag about a sword? And it is short.
nice.
It is a short sword because there are two sizes, and I'm short.
so did they
Um,
present that to you with the with your PhD?
Unfortunately, no, I had to
No.
buy it with my money, but I also needed a confirmation that I have the right to carry. Now I have the right to own it, but I don't have the right to carry it because this is a separate right which is granted to you in a very special ceremony which only takes place when there are enough doctors of philosophy at your university to make it a ceremony, and there are only a few who graduate every year, so they make it
Why don't we
like
have cool ceremonies like that? All we get to
Yeah,
do is stand out in the sun for an hour and then they hand us the diploma.
I think we need a sword ceremony here. I also
Something.
have a sword, and I don't know if you can see that, but
yeah, it's
yeah,
lovely.
yeah, it has nothing to do with PhD. I don't have a PhD, but I do have a sword. So we need a sword ceremony here. So
We need
Absolutely.
something. Oh, man.
Absolutely. But also it's a ceremony sword, so it can't like you should not use it for fencing because it is covered with gold and
oh,
plated with gold plated, and it has this very fragile, I think it's like another type of coating on the blade. So uh basically I spend my time try when I show it off, I put a lot of effort into not like scratching it, which is kind of defeats the purpose of a sword, but at least
well, it's
Yeah,
very well polished, so you want to preserve that.
yes, and it is covered by all kinds of precious metals, which I paid for, but it was again, I think we are getting a discount.
I hope so.
It was not that expensive. It was expensive, but it was, I think, above 200 euros, which is like there are swords that are much more expensive than that.
So, what's next in your near future? Are you currently researching anything, or is there anything you have in mind that you want to research next?
Oh, I'm in that terrible place when I already have the PhD, but I don't have a job, and I'm looking for a job, and there are no jobs, and the jobs that there are out there, there is a lot of competition for them. So, uh, I like it was hard in the uh my situation was that I finished my PhD in 4 years, just as you should in Finland, but then my supervisor refused to read it. I don't know, you can keep it because I already complained to everyone about that. So my supervisor could not find the time to read it, and then there's the review process. So it just kept on going for another year. I was more or less doing nothing. I was not doing research. Of course, I was finalizing my dissertation like in various formal ways, but I was doing nothing in terms of research. So I started another thing, and I started learning electric guitar with a simulation game, and I succeeded. And I wrote a piece of research on that, but it's still very like it's an autoethnography, so it's a very personal, and I'm still working on putting it into the shape of an academic article, or maybe more than one. So yep, I did that, and it was very important to me personally, but also it made me think about game worlds, because I used the game Rocksmith, which is actually discontinued now by Ubisoft, because I used the one-time purchase version, like the box version, and then they discontinued it, and now there is only the subscription version, which is much, much more expensive. And the subscription version wouldn't wait for me for a year to learn play the Dan guitar. It would charge me like 20 bucks every month, and that was beyond my like my the limits that I set for myself to spend on gaming or music or anything that is not like does not lead to a job. So yeah. So
I've been told that um at least in the US that I mean I could be wrong, but I have heard that it's actually difficult for anthropology departments to find linguist professors. That like and then that people who are qualified to be linguist professors go to different departments because they pay better.
I
So I don't
think
know.
again I have two degrees. Only like one is the equivalent of masters in linguistics, and the other is a master, like bachelor's, masters, and then PhD in communication studies. It However difficult it is now for me to find a job in communication studies, there are just so many more options at my level right now than it would be with linguistics. Because again, you need to jump this gap between like you graduating and someone needing you, and there are at least in Europe, every country has its own unique hurdles to jump. And such as it, like now you have to do a postdoc, like you have to do a postdoc before you get a job, an actual job. And in Europe, again, there are not so many postdocs, and there are less and less of them. And of course, they're funded by uh, like the postdocs that receive funding. Like now, everyone is ready to invest into AI research, of course. So there's like 100 postdocs and PhD and financed PhD programs in AI or something. And in linguistics, there are only a handful. So I can it's only like if there are any at all, I'm checking, like I'm speaking about Finland, and in Finland, if they are in Finnish language for the speakers of Finnish language, maybe Swedish language speakers, so they're not international in any way. Uh, yeah, actually, now I see it. Now I see it. In Europe, linguistics is very much about studying like the language of your country and maybe some other language that is not related to it, which is more or less my education as well, my first degree as well. In Finland, it is like Finnish or Swedish and something, or even Finnish and Swedish because they're not related directly. So there are already 2 points of comparison to make a good linguist, mostly. So if they survive until the graduation. So yeah, I guess when you speak about the like international academia, there are like linguistics is too local to be scaled, I think. English linguistics by itself, I'm sorry, but to me it's not that interesting enough, and I can see why there are not so many funded programs to like jump this gap between you finishing, maybe just finishing your master's if there is. Okay, there are always masters, but there is not always a PhD program. So to jump this gap to professorship, there is nothing in between. And in Europe, again, linguistics means something different in Europe, where we have many languages and each country supports the language that is native or spoken in this country, plus maybe some additional languages, as it happened with me in Chinese. And China, yeah, I guess China would be like the same. So it is more a question of how knowledge is structured, how academia is structured. Again, it was so much easier for me to relaunch my career in communication studies, like to start from zero, than to pursue just anything in linguistics, because my options were language teaching, and I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in things such as this weird language which nobody can understand, and it is put in a game, and the whole world is kind of in contradiction to how this language is implemented, and yet this makes an interesting cultural phenomena. You don't get funding to do that, even in Europe. You need to be very, very, like, you need to have your at least one of you need to have one foot in a normal, like stable, easily like sellable discipline, and linguistics is just not one of them. But again, that was just rambling about about why I'm not why my PhD is not in linguistics, why it is in cultural studies. It is about this was my rambling about why my PhD is not in linguistics, but in communication studies. This is just the way academia is structured now. And we'll see worse, I'm afraid, with the AI and further development of technologies that take the human aspect away from many areas of our lives. And the human aspect is what we want to study, I guess. Also, linguists and anthropologists and cultural studies scholars, I guess, all of us, we just want to study the human in us and in others. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Thank you again for joining us. Once again, we're here with Dr. Alesha Serada discussing her article.
There.
Yeah, you're a doctor now with a sword.
I'm doctor. I'm a very, very, yeah.
You better watch
I'm.
out, Ashley. Doctor with a sword here, and you
That's
gotta
why
get those.
That's why they did not give me the right to carry it right away, because then I would come to the defense and imagine that, like, you are defending your dissertation, but with a sword. That's why they don't do it, because these this used to prevent bloodshed in medieval European universities, from what I've been told, which is probably an anecdote.
Well, thanks again for being on the show. To our listeners, you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Check out our website. We have updated the website with our latest book recommendations. And until next time, bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you all for listening. Distribution of Anthropotamus is in collaboration with the American Anthropological Association. Please continue to follow us on Instagram and Twitter @Anthropotamus for our latest episodes, show notes, and book discussion schedule.